Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 2, verse 11. Chapter 2, verse 11. Kol hamincha shetakribu laHashem lo se'aseh chametz. Apropos of the time of year, all mincha offerings that you bring to God, all these flour-based offerings that you bring to God, should not be allowed to become chametz. Ki chol se'or v'chol dvash lo saktiru mimenu isheh laHashem. Because all rising agents, and literally dvash is translated as honey. Rashi explains this means any sweet fruit. You should not burn them on the altar as an offering to God. The one exception is or two exceptions are in verse 12. Korban reishis takrivosam laHashem. You should bring the rising agent and the sweet fruit as a first offering to God. But they don't go up on the altar, not as a sweet smell before God, not as a pleasing smell before God. And now verse 13, and all of your mincha offerings should be salted. You should not set aside the salt of the covenant with your God from upon your offerings, your mincha offerings. Al kol korbancha takriv melach. On all of your offerings, you should bring salt. So, rising agent and sweet fruit, no. Salt, yes. But this verse 12, this thing about the first offerings are brought with the rising agent and the sweet fruit's a little tricky. Let's see Rashi on Pasuk Yud Beis. Korban reishis takrivu osam. Ma yesh lecha lohavi min hasaor umin advash. Korban reishis. What you do bring the rising agent and the sweet fruit with are the first offerings. What is this? Shtei halechem shel atzeres haboim min hasaor shenemar chametz teofena. The loaves of bread of Shavuos that come from barley, it specifically says you should bake it as chametz. These are the beginning offerings of the new crops, of the new grain of the year. That's why it talks about that as reishis, as a first. Ubikurim min hadvash. The other reference to the first has to do with the first fruit offerings. The famous idea of bringing bikurim, you would bring to the Beis HaMikdash sweet fruits. So chametz and sweet fruits, not in general, but yes, for firsts. Well, this is very interesting and somewhat confusing. Let's go to the Ramban on Pasuk Yud Aleph. The Ramban on Pasuk Yud Aleph, it's around the middle of the Ramban. It's probably 10 to 15 lines in, beginning with the words V'tam ha'su'ur v'hadvash. The idea regarding not having rising agent and not having sweet fruit in the offering, Yitachin, it's possible, it could very well be that it's like what the Rambam says, Amar, Shematza B'Sifrayim, Shaminag Haya La'ovdi Avodah Zarah, Lahakriv Komin Chasam Chametz. This is very consistent with the Rambam that we discussed earlier in the week about the idea of bringing animals as sacrifices in the first place. The Rambam says that there were various idol worshippers who would involve bread items in their offerings. And they would mix sweet things into their offerings. So therefore, God says, I don't want any of that stuff on my altar. That would be the idea. The Rambam says, we have this idea because we see the patriarchs would sometimes have monument stones, and yet once idol worshippers began to get into it, God tells us to turn away from those types of things. So sometimes our sense, or God's sense, of how we should serve him is impacted by what we shouldn't be doing. V'tam hamelach amar gam kain bavur shehem yimasu oso v'lo yakrivu klal. On the other hand, explains the Rambam, the thing with salt is these idol worshippers aren't into salt in offerings. So because they don't have salt in offerings, God says, I want salt. So what they bring don't have anything to do with, and what they don't bring have a lot to do with. Now, he does say it could be, the Ramban just adds, it could be that it's considered bland to have bread without salt, and that's not honorable to Hashem. Okay, and it could be that there's something much deeper about all this. That is the Ramban citing the Rambam and putting in a little bit of his own thoughts. Let's now go to the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Yud Aleph. Ki chol sa'or v'chol dvash l'saktiru, korban reishis takrivo sam l'Hashem, ve'al mizbeach lo yalu l'reach nichoach. Piresh Rashi explains, Shtei alechem shel hatzeres boim min ha'sa'or bikurim min ha'dvash. So Rashi already explained what the offerings are that the rising agent and the sweet fruit are acceptable for. The explanation is, Ki kol adam yesh lo tava l'chol chemdos ha'olam hazeh ha'mechunim b'dvash. We all have desires for things in this world. And a good catch term for the things in this world that catch our eye, that get us excited, is dvash, something sweet. Ki k'mosha dvash masuk l'chayich v'ribuyo mazik, kach kol chemdas ha'olam hazeh hemechrechiyim v'ribuyom mazik. It's like honey. Honey tastes very sweet. When we have some honey, it tastes great. But if we have too much of it, it could be very detrimental to our well-being and health. So too, the desires of this world, some of them, we need to channel them. We need to tap into them a little bit. But as a general rule, all the things that we're interested in this world, if we do them to excess, it will be damaging to us. So the golden rule is to interface with that which we need. We need a certain amount of nutrition, but anything excessive we should really stay away from. So that's the idea of dvash. Dvash represents the sweet things in this world, the desires of this world, that if we follow them too much, to too great a quantity, it could be terribly detrimental. Vasa'ur hu dugma le'yitzahara. And the rising agent represents the evil inclination. K'mosha Amar Rabbi Alexandri b'tfilaso, ritzonenu la'asos ritzoncha, ela shesa'ur shebe'isa ma'akiv. A very famous quote from the Gemara in Brachos, that Rabbi Alexandri had a prayer that he said before God, which was, our will is to do your will. That's really what we want. We really want to fulfill your will in this world. The only problem is the rising agent in the dough holds us back. What does that mean? It means our Yetzer Hara. The real me wants to do mitzvos, but my Yetzer Hara gets in the way. So the rising agent is a mashal for the Yetzer Hara. So Dvash represents desires of the world, or represents the evil inclination. Ushnayim ele hachrechiyim lemitzias adam. But both of these things are essential. Both desires and the Yetzer Hara are essential. Kim lo yishtamish b'tzrachav hachrechiyim hamechunim b'dvash yamos v'lo yichya v'lo yiu evarim evarav chazakim afbriim latriach mitzvahs Hashem. Imagine a person would say, I wish I didn't have an appetite. You know how much I mess up because I have an appetite? Really? Really? You wish you didn't have an appetite? If you didn't have an appetite, it'd be very difficult to get the nutrition that you needed, in all seriousness. So we need desire in this world. We just have to curb our desire. We have to listen to our bodies, but we can't do it to excess. But if we didn't have desire, it'd be a terrible thing. If there wasn't an evil inclination in this world, what are the odds that people would get married if there was no sexual desire? What are the odds that people would get married? What are the odds that people would build families? And by the way, in order to get involved with Torah and mitzvos, we have to have these things first. Kemach ain't Torah. Because if a person won't eat in the morning, the famous quote, Kemach ain't Torah. If there's not flour, there won't be Torah. We need to put food in our system to be able to do Torah and mitzvahs during the day. Aval Asek HaTorah Reishis b'machshava u'b'mala, Kfi she'sa'or v'advash yizkarnu, ein b'hem shleimus mitzad atzmam lalos d'riach l'koach l'Hashem, ach shem reishis v'aschol el adam shal yadam v'yochel lov l'dei shleimus ha'nefesh. So we need to follow our desires before we do Torah and mitzvos, but we need to understand that it's really all about Torah and mitzvos. We're not going to bring nachas to Hashem by entering all-you-can-eat contests. I hope I didn't burst anyone's bubble, but it's not going to be a nachas to Hashem. But if we do eat and give ourselves nutrition, then we can do all these beautiful things. We can't bring sacrifices today, but we can do so many other things that bring great joy to Hashem. Okay, Nemar. Therefore, it says in the pasuk, Kol sa'or v'chol dvash lo saktiru mimenu ishel Hashem. Therefore, it says, don't bring an offering to God from the rising agent and from the sweet fruit. Ki mitzad atzmam ein behem shum tzad shleimus asher yal l'reich l'choach l'Hashem ach korban reishis takrivu osam. They shouldn't be your regular routine of offerings, but they should be your first offerings. Meaning, kedei lehoros shem reishis v'aschol el ha'adam la'avio l'dei hashleimus ha'amiti asher yefshar la'asigo b'ladam. We need them at the beginning, but shouldn't be all the way through. Umizeh ha'tam ein makrivin mehem ki masor lekorban reishis b'yom matan Torah ki ha'Torah k'mo ha'tavnei l'yetzer hara. Says the Kli Yakar, it's not a coincidence that the one offering that we have during the year, which does involve bread, is brought on Shavuos, because chametz connects to the Yetzer Hara, and Shavuos, which represents the giving of the Torah, is the ultimate medicine for the Yetzer Hara, the ultimate way to channel the Yetzer Hara appropriately. So specifically, we only bring up the Yetzer Hara in our service to God when we have the Torah to couple it with. The first fruits come from sweet things. When we bring fruits to God, it should specifically be our first fruits. Why? Because by bringing the first fruits to God, we're making a statement that all pleasures we have subsequent to that, every time we have, a fine tasting fruit subsequent to that, it's all been started off and channeled by our bringing the first fruits to God, by a recognition that it's all about God's service in this world. So these are the ideas over here. This is the Rambam and the Kli Yakar in terms of what we're talking about. We talk about Sa'or and Dvash.